Nothing tops the Jolly Rancher story. Steve and his girlfriend Samantha went off to college in August. She went to Florida State, he went to Penn. So, she decides to fly to PA to visit him. He was really happy to see her, so he decided to give her some oral action. He had done this numerous times before and he always enjoyed doing it, but for some reason, this time, she smelled really horrible, and she tasted even worse. He didn't want to offend her though because he hadn't seen her in months, so he put a Jolly Rancher in his mouth to cover it up, even though it didn't do much to help. In the course of eating her out, he accidentally pushed the candy inside of her, and stuck a finger in to grab it out. He took it out, and put it back into his mouth and bit it. Only, it wasn't the Jolly Rancher. It was a nodule of gonorrhea. As in, the blister-like structure that gonorrhea makes filled with diseased pus was the size of a fucking Jolly Rancher and the poor guy bit it. I guess it was really dark in the room. He freaked out and started vomiting all over the place when it exploded in his mouth. He demanded to know what was going on. Turns out she had cheated on him at a club like, the first week of college, and fucked some random guy and the stupid bitch had no clue what was wrong with her. She noticed a strange smell though. So now, Steve is freaking out that he now has gonorrhea of the mouth and God knows what else. STD in the stoma. I work in an emergency room. One time we had a patient who had a colostomy. For those who don't know, this is a surgically placed hole in the abdomen where shit comes out of after the colon is rerouted away from the ass. Anyway, some girl comes in once with an infection in her stoma, abdominal shithole. Turns out it was gonorrhea. Her husband had been cheating on her, picked it up and had been fucking her in her stoma. Buckets of shit and a dead person. Not a cop, but I worked alongside adult protective services and sometimes cops. The place smelled absolutely dreadful. The elderly lady was dead sitting upright on the couch. She had shat herself a watery one at that time of death apparently. That's not the only thing that smelled bad. There were buckets of shit. Literally dozens of buckets filled with fecal matter in every room of the house. One of the cops didn't have a face mask, and he almost puked every time he coughed or sneezed because all of the dust and the putrid smell. Apparently the elderly lady lived in the home with a few of her brothers. Some homeless people that were squatting in the backyard were the ones that called the police because they saw the brothers leave, but hadn't seen the lady in days. The smell coming from the house also raised some red flags. Smelly cum on the wall. I was a fresh officer with dreams being a hero. I get dispatched to a call of a family fight. Not wife-husband, but brother-sister. The female was reporting the male had attacked her. I arrived and located a female and male. The male I knew from prior contacts. I detained him in handcuffs and quickly smelled the strong odor of pepper spray. I found out that after the male knocked off the female's weave she pepper sprayed him. I knew there were different types of pepper spray, like gel. I'm walking around the house taking photos for my investigation and accessing the property damage. I noticed that in his room the odor from the pepper spray was extremely strong and made my eyes instantly water with a decent amount of stinging sensation. The fumes made it incredibly hard to breathe and left me without the ability to breathe at points, requiring that I leave the room to get fresh air. I find a brownish gel substance all over the walls in the shape of handprints. I photograph it and determine that it was the pepper gel that male suspect was wiping off of his face onto the wall. I found it odd that it was all over the walls and covered the room. I thought this chick dusted him with the entire can of pepper gel. After some investigation I took the male to jail. I responded to the same house several days after for an unrelated medical issue. There were more family members at the house and the male was still in custody. I was having a conversation with the family as the hero firefighters were saving the day. I inquired if they had fully cleaned up the pepper spray from the male's room. They gave me a strange look and told me there was none in there. I told them about the gel that was on the wall. I then sat there in horror as they explained to me this man had been, for years, coming on his walls and playing with it. And the gel was in fact old cum and the fumes were the pungent smell of this man's cum room. My fucking god. Removing shit from patient ass by hand. I used to be a nurse's aide. I once had to put a very obese woman on the bedpan, she was only mid-40s, and I left. She put her call light on, and when I answered she said she was all done. I turn her on her side to remove the bedpan only to see that it is empty. My first thought was that she had been mistaken about having pooped. But then I look and realize that her ass cheeks were so massive her entire dump couldn't make it the length of her cheeks and had gotten wedged in between them. I had to dig the entire load out of her as by hand. It was only about 2 months into the job and it gave me some serious second thoughts. Haha. Lady cut in half by incoming mobile home. As a paramedic, responded to a call of traffic accident, baby ejected. We prepared for the worst we could imagine. Arrive in about 8 minutes, trooper on scene trying to clear the area of bystanders, gawkers and preserve the scene. He had covered the baby with the yellow death sheet troopers carry in their trunks. Lifted the sheet to check vitals, pronounced death, and it was not a baby, but the top half of the 19-year-old girl that was driving the small pickup truck about 50 yards away. She was driving, and arguing with her 19-year-old husband who was the passenger. They were doing about 55 miles per hour on a 2-lane road, and met an oncoming truck pulling a double-wide mobile home. She ran under the front corner of the mobile home, cutting her in half. Her bottom half remained in the driver's seat, while her unhurt husband watched as the truck skidded another 50 to 60 yards, sideswiping a minivan, sending it into the ditch upside down. When the truck came to rest, her bottom half fell out onto the ground. We also found a trail of ribs from the cab to the bed, and down the pavement to the top half. It looked like a movie set. Her top and bottom looked unhurt, but from mid-chest to about pelvis was strung along the road. The husband was absolutely freaking out about what he had just seen. He was babbling incoherently, running around swinging at people, just a mess. A witness who lived right in front of the scene started having chest pains, and had to be transported. We took the husband, and I called medical control and actually got orders to give him IV Valium, something paramedics normally can only give for grand mal seizures. The driver of the big truck was fine, but was also very distraught at what he had just witnessed. That was 16 years ago and I can still remember pulling up to that scene like it was yesterday. Rotted tampon in the vagina. A few years back when I was a medical student I was doing my primary care rotation when I had to see a morbidly obese lady for a gynecologic issue. She said she was having a lot of itching and soreness in her vagina. Even as I set up for a pelvic exam I could already tell it wasn't gonna be good. I could smell a foul odor already and I haven't even looked. I was gloving up when I got so nauseated and I was about to get sick. So I excused myself and lied to my attending that I had a problem taking a look in her cause she was so obese and I didn't have much experience with such a challenge. The truth was I just couldn't stay in the room. It smelled like rotting vagina. A few minutes later my attending calls for me to show me what he found. I thought for sure it would be an aborted fetus but I was wrong. I go in with my mask and there my attending dangles this cylindrical object covered with bloody debris. It was a fucking tampon. She apparently had difficulty removing it a week ago. My attending kept saying, "It stinks like a mag." The embarrassed patient was crying and I felt bad but I had to step out of the room cause I was starting to regurgitate my saliva and was about to puke. To this day I can't forget that smell. It took a few weeks before I was able to go down on my girlfriend again. I think that was my deciding factor as far as not going into OB/GYN. I just don't wanna encounter the rotting vagina smell again ever. Smelly folded skin of obese patient. A super obese, that's an actual medical term, woman comes to clinic complaining of a foul odor that she's noticed. And yeah, me and the attending noticed it too, a smell somewhere between rancid milk mixed with rotting fish and a disemboweled skunk swimming in garbage. We do the usual workup, take a good history, do a thorough physical as best we can given she is huge and has folds and folds of fat and skin draped all over her including rectal, genital exam just in case there was some funky down there growth, and run some simple labs. As me and the attending are discussing how we have no clue what is going on, the nurse comes out holding a green, soggy mush in her gloved hands and waves it in front of our faces. I nearly puked right there. Turns out the woman was using pieces of bread to soak up sweat by putting them in between her fat folds. Apparently she forgot about one of the pieces, which then stayed there to marinate in her juices for weeks, as estimated by the patient. I was sent in to see if there were any more hidden pieces. Luckily there wasn't, but having to lift up and search every fat fold was as embarrassing for her as it was disgusting for me. Maggots on a live person. This one wasn't mine but from an EMT friend. It's also maybe not so much creepy as nasty, but it makes my hair stand on end whenever I think on it. In one of the apartments in a nearby city, the APT manager went in to investigate a really bad smell in one of the lower units. Apparently people all around it were complaining. Once he saw what was up, he called the ambulance. So first responders show up, which includes said EMT friend, and there's this lady sitting on the couch. There's also something squirmy going on down below in her underpants area. So they check her out, and in the process remove said undergarments. Out falls a swarm of maggots. Yes, her lady bits were covered in them. Apparently, said individual had a fairly strong substance abuse problem. Some of the needles she poked into her nethers, which caused an infection. This led to rotting flesh which attracted flies which in turn led to maggots. The worst part, she was not dead, just so drugged up that she basically never noticed that she was literally rotting and falling apart from the waist down.